onto the theories of romantic relationships. So the first one is the social exchange theory. So this is the idea that relationships are built on like exchanging things, similar to like money. So it's about rewards, costs and profits. So Theobald and Kelly in 1959 described romantic relationship with an economic terminology. As mentioned, the partners are striving to maximize rewards and minimize costs. Relationships are maintained as long as rewards are greater than costs, and there are two ways in which profit is measured. The first one is a comparison level. So this is based on the idea of how much reward they deserve, which links to their own self-esteem, and it's quite subjective as it develops from previous romantic experiences and is influenced by cultural norms. A relationship is pursued if their comparison level is better than previous relationships. Basically, if they feel like they deserve more reward than their previous relationship, then they're going to pursue that person. And it also says that relationships develop through 4 stages. The first stage is sampling. So this is when you explore the rewards and costs of a relationship through direct experience or observation. So that's like if you have a crush on someone, you're just kind of watching them. The second stage is bargaining. You exchanges the rewards and costs. This is kind of when you talk to them and you say, you kind of like try to understand the rewards that you're going to get by pursuing a relationship and the costs of the relationship. Commitment is when you become more familiar with each other and it becomes more, and so the relationship becomes stable. You're familiar with the expectations, and so the rewards are higher and the costs are lower. The fourth stage is institutionalization. This is settled in relationship as rewards and costs are firmly established. So supporting evidence. It was supported by research by Sprecher in 2001, who found that the comparison level alternatives was a strong... wait, I didn't actually... Did I talk about that? Well, and it's basically when you consider whether an alternative relationship will be better, and you notice when alternatives are you notice them when the current relationship costs outweighs rewards. So when your relationship isn't going well, you notice alternative people. So yeah. So he found that the comparison level alternative was a strong predictor of commitment and that rewards were important, especially for women. However, basing complex relationships on reward and complex relationships and behaviors is quite reductionistic, and so therefore it limits the range of real-life relationships the social exchange theory can explain. Although some findings do suggest that some people do evaluate relationships on rewards and costs. Another positive is that it has a useful real-life application in integrated behavioral couples therapy, and it is trained because people are trained to increase the proportion of positive exchanges. And Christensen found that 2/3 of couples reported improvement and a happier relationship. Clark and Mills, however, found that the theory fails to distinguish between exchanged relationships, which is like work colleagues, so when you go to work, and romantic relationships. So it says it applies more. This whole exchange theory applies more to like your job and your work colleagues, rather than your romantic relationship. And this is because the studies have artificial tasks. Like the studies done on social exchange theory often has artificial tasks, so it's not. Yeah, this links to determinism as many cases where people stay in high cost relationships without dissatisfaction. So the predictive validity of the social exchange theory is limited, and alternative explanations which consider equity may be better. Equity is we'll go into that later. That's basically when you have it's when you have the relationship is fair and it's like equal. Okay, so for the next, the equity theory. So equity, as I said before, is fairness. It was proposed by Wolster. He said that both partners' level of profit should be the same. This differs from the previous one, as he says that the rewards should be the same. Actually, that kind of is the same, or around the same, yeah. And under or over benefiting can cause inequity, which is, it's like unequal, which leads to dissatisfaction. Under benefiting leads to hostility and resentment, and over benefiting leads to guilt and shame. Satisfaction is about perceived fairness, ratio of rewards to costs. Perceived fairness is how you perceive the fairness. The consequences: problems arise when partner puts lots into relationships and gets little back. So when this leads to dissatisfaction and a greater perceived inequity, which means greater dissatisfaction, and this has a positive correlation. Changes in perceived equity. Changes over time, changes in perceived equity are changes over time, which are normal to put more. Changes over time lead to changes in perceived equity, as it is found that it becomes normal to put more in than what is received at start. But if it continues, this leads to dissatisfaction. So you put more in the beginning of a relationship, you put more in than what is received. But if this continues and you don't receive enough back, it leads to dissatisfaction. Dealing with inequity. It's found that under benefiting people try to make a relationship equitable or revise their perception of rewards and costs to make relationship feel more equitable. What was once considered a cost now accepted as a norm. This is a cognitive change. This is supported by evidence that this is more valid than the social exchange theory. Utne conducted a survey of 118 recently married couples of various ages who had been together 2+ years before marrying, and he found that couples who considered relationships equitable were more satisfied than those who were under benefiting or over benefiting. This confirms the central prediction of equity theory, and therefore increases the internal validity of the theory. However, it doesn't account for individual differences, as not all partners are concerned about achieving equity. Hugeman in 1987 found that some people are less sensitive to equity than others, and equity is therefore not a global feature of relationships, and so it may be better to study romantic relationships using idiographic approach, as idiographic is when you take everything into account. It also suffers from cultural bias. This is the concept of equity being found more important in Western culture, because in collectivist culture people are more satisfied when they're over-benefiting. As research also shows that gender differences in perception of relationship fairness is also ignored by the equity theory, and therefore they could avoid this beta bias by doing research on genders as well. So Roosevelt's investment model is all about commitment, and it states that rather than compared to the other theories, it says that commitment is the main factor in causing people to stay in a relationship, not satisfaction. Because, as mentioned before, some people who are dissatisfied, they still stay in a relationship, and this is actually because they put a larger investment, so they try to repair a damaged relation. They're more invested in trying to repair it rather than just leaving. So, and this consists of 3 factors. Number 1, satisfaction. This is based on the comparison level, as people are judged by comparing. As people judge the rewards and cost, and it's satisfying when the rewards are greater than the costs. So this leads to deeper satisfaction, and with the deeper satisfaction there is more commitment. Another reason for being more committed is comparison with the alternative. So this is when people judge alternative relationships, and they ask themselves if the alternative relationship is better for their needs. This includes the possibility of no romance, however. So if you see somebody that has lots of money, you might consider them, even if you have no romantic feelings for them. But you might stay more committed to somebody if they're less attractive, but they're better for your needs. Investment size is the third factor. So this is the main one. So if there's a investment is a resource associated with a relationship that would be lost if it ends. So an intrinsic investment is when you put lots of resources directly into a relationship, like effort and money. An extrinsic investment is where things are brought into people's lives through relationship, like children, friends, and memories. This is supported by research studies. Lay et al. In 2003 did a meta-analysis of 52 studies including participants from 5 countries, and he found that the satisfaction and comparison with alternatives and investment will greatly contribute to commitment, so it supports this whole idea. Also, he conducted this in individualist and collectivist cultures, so therefore the outcomes are true across all cultures. I also did males and females, and homo and hetero couples. This increases the validity to Rosbaught's claim that these factors are universally important features of romantic relationships. It also may explain why people stay in abusive relationships, as abused women are more likely to return to their abusive partner if they felt they invested lots into the relationship at the start, and if they didn't have appealing alternatives. This applies to many experiences the social exchange theory and equity theory fail to explain, and so it has a good real-life application. However, most of the research is based on correlation, and therefore is unable to predict if investment causes commitment, and investment model is quite reductionistic. So Duck's phase model proposes that relationship breakup. It's all about this is like about a relationship breakup rather than attaining a relationship. It states that a breakup is a process of stages and not a one-off event. So the first stage is called the intrapsychic phase. This is a cognitive process in which a dissatisfied partner considers the reasons for dissatisfaction. They weigh the pros and cons and considers alternatives, and maybe make plans for their future. The threshold. I can't stand this anymore. Okay, the dyadic phase is number 2. It confronts the partner, and this is where you confront your partner and voice your dissatisfaction, like a lack of equity. There are 2 outcomes of this. They either reconciliate and have a desire to repair, or they continue with their breakup. The threshold is, I would be justified in withdrawing. Okay, the number 3 is the social phase. This is when you make your breakup public and you kind of tell everyone in your mutual circle of friends, and they are expected to take a side. This is the point of no return, because the breakup is accelerated by social forces. For example, you wouldn't want to return to a relationship after telling everybody that you're not going to return to that relationship. The threshold is, I mean it. The grave dressing phase is the last phase. This is the aftermath of a breakup, where both sides construct their own version of why a relationship ended, usually at the expense of the other partner. This helps to rebuild their self-esteem and move on. The threshold is time to start a new life. Okay, a problem with this theory is that it's incomplete. Duck himself says that his own model is oversimplified and reductionistic, so he modified it to add a resurrection phase after grave dressing. This is where the ex-partners, turn in their attention to future relationships. Therefore, progression to next phase isn't inevitable, as it previously said. It didn't really consider what happens after. So therefore it can also be possible to return to earlier stage, and therefore these changes overcome the weakness of the original reductionistic model, which didn't account for the dynamic nature of breakups. Useful application. Useful application. There is a useful application in couples counseling, as this whole model recognizes that different repair strategies are more effective at particular points in breakup compared to others. Couples in an intrinsic stage are encouraged to focus on positive aspects of partner. Like you're encouraged to focus on the pros and cons, and in couples counseling you are encouraged to look at the pros. Also, in the dyadic phase, communication about dissatisfaction and ways to balance the relationship are also emphasized, and therefore it has a good real-life application, helping couples stay together through relationship counseling. However, it is based on individualistic relationships from cultures where ending relationships is a voluntary choice and separation is easily obtainable and it is the norm. This may not be the case in collectivist cultures where relationships are sometimes arranged and they're therefore difficult to end due to family and social structures. These do not follow the phase model. Also, there are individual differences which are not accounted for. Dixon found that friends and family see teenagers' breakups as less serious, and therefore they put less effort into reconciling their partners. This, which is different compared to older couples who are obviously taken more seriously. Therefore, this phase model does not account for all relationships, and therefore it takes a normathetic approach. It tries to generalize to all the relationships, but it can't, due to individual differences. An ethnographic approach might be better in this case.